All right, good afternoon. As a reminder, we announced yesterday, the Secretary General is heading off to Brussels tonight for a series of meetings with European leaders as well as Belgian authorities. He'll begin his program tomorrow, with a meeting with the European Commission, during which they will discuss several issues, including collaboration between the European Union and the United Nations, the promotion of sustainable and inclusive development, and the promotion of an inclusive pandemic recovery based on the SDGs, global access to vaccines, climate, and multilateralism. Also, as a reminder, on Thursday, Secretary General will deliver an address to the European Parliament in Brussels. We will share those remarks under embargo with you tomorrow morning. We'll also keep you updated on his activities while in Brussels. And the Secretary General this morning spoke via pre-recorded video message to the 9th Moscow Conference on International Security. Mr. Guterres noted that as a founding member of the United Nations and a permanent member of the Security Council, the Russian Federation has always been a champion of the work of our organization and of multilateralism. He stressed the importance of role of partnership in addressing the full range of global peace and security challenges, from nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation to preventing the use of chemical and biological weapons, from cybersecurity to disinformation. As we told you yesterday, the Undersecretary General for Peace Operations, Jean-Pierre Lacroix, is representing the Secretary General physically in Moscow. While in Moscow, Mr. Lacroix will also meet with senior Russian officials, and he will thank Russia for its support and contributions to peacekeeping. Deborah Lyons, the special representative of the Secretary General for Afghanistan, briefed the Security Council by VTC this morning. She said that she could not overstate her concern regarding the present situation in the country. She warned that of all the major trends, whether concerning politics, security, the peace process, the economy, the humanitarian emergency, or COVID, are negative or stagnant. She said that the mid-April announcement that all international troops will be withdrawn in the coming months sent a seismic tremor through the Afghan political system and society at large. The withdrawal decision was expected, but its speed, with the majority of troops now already withdrawn, was not, she added. The special representative noted the recent offensives by the Taliban, saying that more than 50 of Afghanistan's 370 districts have fallen since the beginning of May. Ms. Lyons said that the UN mission continues to work within its mandate and in cooperation with member states to find ways to move forward in the negotiations, but she warned that the drivers of conflict seem for now to overwhelm the reasonable and hoped-for modalities of negotiations. And the UN Relief and Works Agency for Palestine refugees, better known as UNRWA, is launching a $164 million humanitarian and early recovery appeal following the hostilities in Gaza in May. This updated appeal incorporates the immediate emergency response actions implemented by UNRWA in Gaza and the West Bank between the 10th and 31st of May, as well as early recovery needs of Palestine refugees in Gaza and the West Bank, including East Jerusalem. The appeal for this year outlines the needs for emergency shelter repairs, humanitarian assistance for displaced families, and emergency repairs and maintenance of UNRWA installations. The funds also will be required to temporarily subsidize rental payments for those Palestinian families whose shelters have been completely destroyed or damaged, in the form of transitional shelter cash assistance. And I wanted to flag something from our colleagues at the World Food Programme today, who warned that famine, already present in 4 countries, could become a reality for millions of people around the world without urgent funding and access to families cut off by conflict. Recent WFP analyses show that 41 million people are teetering on the very edge of famine in 43 countries, and the slightest shock would push them over this precipice. This includes over 500,000 people in Ethiopia, Madagascar, South Sudan, and Yemen. Other countries of particular concern are Nigeria and Burkina Faso. WFP said that conflict, climate change, and economic shocks have been driving the rise in hunger, But this is compounded by soaring prices for basic foods this year. I think we've been flagging to you on a regular basis the FAO Food Price Index, which keeps going up. In many countries like Lebanon, Nigeria, Sudan, Venezuela, and Zimbabwe, our currency depreciation is adding to these pressures and driving food prices even higher. This year, WFP is undertaking the biggest operation in its history, targeting 139 million people. With sufficient funding and access, WFP says it is able to provide all those who risk famine in 2021 with life-saving food and nutrition assistance. For that, they need $6 billion. And as a case in point of the fragility of systems, the humanitarian coordinator in Nigeria, Edward Cologne, has warned that a combination of escalating conflict, displacement, and loss of livelihoods due to COVID-19 could heighten the risk of hunger for millions of people in Nigeria's northeast. As many as 4.4 million people in the northeast are at risk of acute hunger during the lean season between June and September. This is the worst outlook in 4 years. Mr. Cologne says the targeting of aid workers and their assets, including through kidnappings and violence, has limited access to and freedom of movement for humanitarian workers and for people in need of support. He warned that the effects of COVID-19 and climate change, which has increased conflict over natural resources on top of a funding shortage, has brought the humanitarian situation to a potential tipping point. Nigeria's humanitarian response plan for 2021 calls for just over $1 billion, is only 19% funded. And in Mozambique, another forgotten emergency, our humanitarian colleagues tell us that clashes in the country's north are driving one of the world's fastest growing displacement crises. The number of people who have fled their homes in Cabo Delgado surged by nearly 650% last year. Currently, more than 732,000 people have been displaced, of whom at least 30% have been forced to flee more than once, according to the International Organization for Migration. An attack on Palma on March 24th and subsequent clashes across the district have forced nearly 70,000 people from their homes. Many had to walk for days with nothing more than the clothes on their backs. People are also trying to seek asylum in Tanzania, but are systematically being forcibly returned to Mozambique. UNHCR says nearly 10,000 people were repatriated after entering Tanzania this year, half of them during the last month alone. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs tells us the situation is leading to a severe hunger crisis on top of multiple health and protection crises. Aid organizations have helped more than 700,000 men, women, and children this year, but they are hampered by insecurity, access challenges, and underfunding. Only 11% of the $254 million needed have been received so far. And turning to Myanmar, where nearly 5 months after the military took over, the government, our colleagues on the ground say they remain deeply concerned over the continued reports of violence being used by security forces, with daily reports of death and injuries. At least 872 unarmed women, children, and men have been killed across Myanmar since February 1st, while thousands more people have been injured. Our colleagues in the country continue to call for the military to refrain from violence and the disproportionate use of force, including the use of live ammunition on protesters. And we have a COVAX update for you from Brazil and Honduras. On Sunday, Brazil received more than 840,000 Pfizer doses from COVAX, adding that the more than 5 million AstraZeneca doses has already obtained from COVAX. Brazil will receive further 4 million additional AstraZeneca doses in the coming weeks. Our colleagues tell us that nearly 79 million people in Brazil will have been vaccinated to date. Meanwhile, Honduras received more than 200,000 doses through COVAX, bringing the total number it has received so far to 450,000. For this latest shipment, the Honduran government has begun its 5th vaccination campaign. And just a question that I have a couple more notes, but I want to flag. I was asked a question by your colleagues at Prensa Latina who are not able to dial in from Havana, where they're waiting their visas. They were asking about tomorrow's meeting of the General Assembly that will address the draft resolution calling for the end of the United States blockade against Cuba. And I can tell you that while this is a matter for member states, in the context of the pandemic, the Secretary General has encouraged member states to waive sanctions imposed on countries to ensure access to food, essential health supplies, and COVID-19 medical support. The resolution, which passes every year, reflects the overwhelming sentiment of member states of the General Assembly and is something that, of course, we take note of. And our colleagues in the UN Development Coordination Office tell us that we have 2 new resident coordinators. We want to share their names with you. They're taking up their positions today. Amakobe Sande of Kenya is our new UN resident coordinator in Eritrea, and Suzanne Ngongi Namondo of Cameroon is taking up her new post as the resident coordinator in Uganda. And we congratulate them both. As you know, resident coordinators lead to the work of our UN teams on the ground, including supporting authorities responding to the multiple impacts of the pandemic and to recover better towards the achievement of the Sustainable Development Goals. Full biographies available upstairs, or whatever, in our office and on the web. And tomorrow, my guest will be Achim Steiner, the administrator of the UN Development Program, who is also co-chair of the High-Level Dialogue on Energy, as well as Damimola Ogyumbiyi, the special representative of the Secretary General for the Sustainable Energy for All and co-chair of the High-Level Dialogue on Energy. They will be join us virtually to brief on the ministerial thematic forums for the High-Level Dialogue on Energy, which are currently taking place. The thematic forums bring together virtually key stakeholders over 5 days, that's June 21st to 25th, to mobilize actions on a major milestone on the road to the High-Level Dialogue on Energy, which will take place in September 21st. And lastly, we now have 111 member states who have paid their budget dues in full, which is 111, I'm sure, is an auspicious number in some culture. And in fact, the country that paid its dues rhymes with auspicious. Can anybody guess what that country is? All right, who spoke first? I think Benno. I think it was me. All right, Benno. Oh, yeah. We, you know, it is like we could go to the virtual referee and check the video, but that would take too much time. So, Benno, if you have a question, ask it. Otherwise, you may yield.
I do have a question, and it's actually about football. So the referee thing was pretty fitting. So you might have seen there's a tense discussion in Europe about the display of the rainbow flag on the Munich stadium when Germany plays Hungary tomorrow. The European Football Association denied that the rainbow flag can be displayed, saying it's not a political organization and it can't be displayed. Does the Secretary General have any opinion about banning, a symbol of tolerance from the public?
Look, UEFA has its own rules for his part. I think the Secretary General has been very clear in his support of the rights of everybody and the rights of people to love who they want to love and be with whoever they want to be, and is supporting and has spoken out against any discrimination against people based on their sexual gender, sexual identity, and who they want to be with, as I said. Toby.
Thank you, Steph. 2 questions for you today. The head of the military in Myanmar is in Moscow, Secretary General delivering a message to the military conference there. Will he include a message for the military in Myanmar in that video message?
The Secretary General delivered his video message, which had been pre-recorded, which we shared with you today. I mean, I think our message to the authorities in Myanmar, to the Tamil remains the same. And I think we've seen even today reports, very disturbing reports of violence in Mandalay. And we again condemn all forms of violence, reaffirm our unwavering support to the people of Myanmar in their pursuit of democracy, peace, human rights, and the rule of law. I think the Special Envoy, Christine Schrager-Bergener, in her briefing to the General Assembly last week, warned about the risks of large-scale violence and reiterated or called for maximum restraint. The Security Council, I think, as well as the General Assembly, through the resolution adopted on Friday, have called upon all parties to exercise utmost restraint and seek a peaceful solution through constructive dialogue and reconciliation.
Thanks for that. Also, was there a comment from your office about Juneteenth here in the United States? If so, I missed it. It's pretty significant development, pertaining to a huge part of American history that has been largely ignored, and I think that would be something that the UN would want to weigh in on.
We have not had any, there's been no comment. Obviously, I think the issue of not only commemoration and remembrance of past crimes and suffering and violations of the most basic human rights are extremely important. The UN, for its part, as you know, has a program called the Remembrance of the Transatlantic Slave Trade. So it's something we have been very much pushing for, and in terms of remembering the victims and avoiding repetition. I mean, I would encourage you to look more at what we've been doing in that as well. Abdelhamid.
Thank you, Stéphane. I also have a couple of questions. First, about the Berlin conference tomorrow. This conference has been in planning for a long time, and the SG, I am sure, is aware of it. How could he not plan to attend in person the Berlin II conference on Libya? And he's in the region, so how could
I think there have been issues of planning. The Secretary General was not able to. As you know, he delivered a message. Rosemary DiCarlo is there. She's leading the UN delegation. The Secretary General has been extremely involved on the Libya file, working the phones since the beginning. In fact, going there, if you'll recall, a few years ago, going to see all the political leaders. So I think his direct involvement has been constant and consistent.
Thank you. My second question, if you have more details about that failed meeting between Mr. Winsland and his Palestinian counterpart. Do you have any
nothing more than I can share with you.
Okay, and my last question about the bargain that Israel reached with the Palestinians to sell them 1 million vaccine, and it was almost expired. WHO, as I read, warned Israel that they should not sell this pack of vaccines, which is 1 million of them. Had it gone through, it would hurt millions of Palestinians, and they were aware of it. Are you aware of this development, and do you have any opinion on that?
I would check with our WHO colleagues. Thank you. Ray, and then Celia, go ahead.
Thank you, Stéphane. Yesterday, the Secretary General mentioned in a tweet that there is a $5 trillion surge in wealth of the richest in past year, and 120 million people have been pushed to extreme poverty. Can I have a comment about this? And also regarding the COVID protocol in the United Nations building and in the next UNGA, is there any update? Thank you.
On the next UNGA, none that I'm aware of, but our friend Amy, who will speak on behalf of the President General Assembly, I'm sure will field that question. We may have some updates shortly on protocols on how we work inside, on what the regulations are for the wearing of masks or non-wearing of masks. So as soon as we have an update on that, we will share that with you. I think the Secretary General's tweet was very clear about the inequalities which have grown wider since the start of the pandemic. This is something he referred to in his remarks to the General Assembly on Friday. It was a bit obscured, I'm sure, because it was just after his reelection. But he also made that same comment in April, I think, of this year at a statement when he was speaking to ECOSOC. And I think, as he put it, the reports are that there was a $5 trillion surge in the wealth of the world's richest people in the past year. All at the same time, we've seen about 120 million people being pushed back into poverty. So what the Secretary General was saying is he was encouraging governments to consider, some sort of a solidarity or a wealth tax at the national level to kind of address this yawning inequality. Celia?
Stéphane, a dozen tourists, mostly Russians, were arrested over a week ago in the Chadian Sahara. And do we know what they were doing in a red zone?
I have not seen those. I have not seen those reports, but I will. I mean, I don't know what tourists were doing in Chad. I mean, it's not for what?
Tourists?
Yeah, I don't know. We don't run the tourist agencies. But what is clear is that if people have been kidnapped, this is a very serious issue.
No,
that
they were arrested.
Okay, let me before I say anything else, let me check.
Okay.
Thank you. Yes, sir, and then Carla.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon. I would like to talk about Dr. Ralph Bunche. He was a UN mediator who, in 1950, he was awarded the prestigious Nobel Peace Prize for his work in mediating the Palestinian-Israeli conflict in the Middle East. First African American to be awarded this prestigious Nobel Prize. Monumental achievement. But many feel that his legacy has not been preserved and honored, particularly at the United Nations, given Dr. Bunche was involved in the very foundation of the UN Charter in 1945. So my question is the Secretary General going to think about having a commission like a statue or a bust or something that's going to honor his legacy? And how would he respond to some who are concerned that the UN hasn't done much to honor this man's legacy?
I think anyone who is a student of international affairs, a student of the UN, can only be in awe of the work of Ralph Bunche, his dedication, his creativity in shaping the United Nations as it is today, in taking what was in taking the ideals that were signed on the Charter in 1945 and adapting them, in a sense, to the real world. And I think we can only honor that. More can always be done. I feel that we refer to him, I think we refer to him often. He is remembered, thanks to the city of New York, by a park across the street. But I think you cannot talk about the history or the past or even the future of the United Nations without recognizing Ralph Bunche's contributions, without which we would not have the UN we have today. Yes, Carla.
Thank you. I actually have two questions, but I think Ron asked my first about the tweet that the Secretary General, when was that tweet and how do we get a printout of it? Because I don't tweet, so I don't know.
Well, I mean, I can't help you. Go on Twitter.com and sign up and look at the tweets. And otherwise, I would urge you to read the remarks the Secretary General delivered on Friday, which make the points that are in the tweet. And he said the same thing a few months ago as well. So they're in his speeches.
So which meeting on Friday did he speak?
As I said, at the meeting of the General Assembly, the least developed countries.
Okay, and the second question has to do with a case I've brought up on multiple occasions on Lithuania's violation of democratic rights of the great journalist and leader Algirdas Paleckis, whose grandfather was the president of Lithuania. He has been in prison in solitary confinement for a year and a half. He has been tortured. His mother was attacked. And why are there no words? All we hear about is Navalny, but Algirdas Paleckis, who's a formidable and brilliant man whom I happen to know,
I will look into that case. I don't have anything. I don't have any language on that top of my head. But let me look into that. Okay. Let me go to the screen for a second, and then we'll go to the second round. Majid, you had a question. Majid. Okay, Abdelhamid, you're back on.
Thank you. 16 hours ago, a group of settlers, accompanied by a member of the Knesset, attacked Sheikh Jarrah again and the family of Kurd. And there was fire, and the people of the neighborhood came to rescue the house. 20 Palestinians were injured. Are you aware of these developments?
I mean, we've seen these developments. Obviously, the violence is very concerning to us in Sheikh Jarrah. I think it's very important for political and community leaders to stand against violence, incitement, as well as inflammatory rhetoric. Okay, seeing no further questions, I will turn it over to my friend Amy. You're up.